Did you know that you can change your brain? Did you know that you can literally change the function and the structure of your brain? And in this video, inshallah, I'm going to be showing you guys the exact method to use to do this. Whether you are dealing with constant anxiety, depression, or even trauma, this is going to be the way to help move out of that, inshallah. If you're new here, assalamu alaikum. My name is Hannah. I am a PA who practices medicine and a trauma coach who works with Muslim women to help them heal and integrate trauma. If this is something that you're looking for, you want that support, you are sick and tired of your trauma ruling your life, go to the links in my description to learn more about the work that I do and how you can work with me. If you're a new or if you're a recurring viewer or recurring subscriber, welcome back. And I'm sure you're wondering, what is with this setup? I'm actually using my laptop because I'm going to be showing you guys an exact method that I use with my own one-on-one coaching clients to help them rewire their brain. So let's get into it, inshallah. I'm going to share my screen. All right. So let's start up here. So let me actually erase this for right now. I want you to remember the phrase think, feel, choose, because we are going to be going right back to it. But we'll start off by talking about the brain. Now, the brain is incredible. It is the most complex organ in our body. It is also a part of the most complex system, body system in our body, which is the nervous system. And one thing that is so profoundly amazing about the brain and just an incredible manifestation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy is the fact that the brain is plastic. And when I say plastic, I don't mean plastic like this pen. I mean plastic as in it's malleable. It can change. It can literally rewire itself. Now, this might not seem like much to you, but up until a few decades ago, the running predominant narrative was that the brain can't change. It's fixed, and that the way it is the way it's going to stay. You can imagine what the implications of a narrative like that was on mental health or on trauma or on people with traumatic brain injuries. If you believe that there's nothing that can be done, then so many people were left to fend for themselves without the opportunity to do things that would literally change their lives. Well, that's no longer what we're dealing with now, alhamdulillah. And so, with that being said, we are going to talk about how we do that. How do we use neuroplasticity, or the fact that the brain can change and rewire itself to our advantage to help address anxiety that we might have, to help address depression that we might have, to help integrate the trauma or the trauma responses that we have. And it all starts with think or thought. Now, we all have negative thoughts. Everyone does. And in fact, many of us don't even recognize the negative thoughts that we have because they're so subconscious and they play in the background of our mind. But some of these negative thoughts become the dominating thoughts of our belief system. And it gets so strong that we think that it is the truth. And one example that we will use is nobody wants me. This is a very common negative thought that I come across. I mean, I think all of us know someone who thinks this way, or maybe we even think this way in a bit, in a particular way. Now, what happens when we have a negative thought, or really a thought in general? But we're going to focus on negative thinking because nobody wants to change the positive thoughts. We want to change the negative thoughts. Now, when we have this negative thought, what ends up happening is it essentially triggers the brain to fire a neural impulse. What does that mean? These right here are neurons, or they're an image, a very crude image of a neuron, which is a brain cell. Our brain is made up of a bunch of neurons, all of these cells connecting to one another and communicating with each other. And when we have one nerve cell connecting to another, we call this a neural impulse, right? And so this thought triggers the brain to send a signal, and that signal reaches different organs of our body. Now, here's the thing. Oftentimes, we don't think about the way that we physically feel in the sense of what our organs or our muscles are doing, but it's all happening. And so you might find that, you have certain physical reactions, like your heart starts racing or your neck starts hurting in response to certain thoughts. And of course, almost simultaneously, what's happening is we're having emotions in response to all of this. And then these emotions invoke an action. right? They lead us to take certain action. Now, this is very theoretical, so let's use the example that I just put to help you understand in real time what is going on. And then we'll talk about how do we rewire the brain so this doesn't become the automatic cascade. So let's say we have the negative thought of nobody wants me. This is a thought that happens, which then triggers this nerve impulse, one after another. Now, our organs and different parts of our body start to respond. For example, you might think this, and if you notice the physical state that you're in at that time, you're probably not sitting up straight, happy, smiling. You're probably frowning. You're probably slumped over. You might feel a tightness in your chest. You might feel a lump in your throat. These are all physiological responses. These are not emotions. They are actual responses that your physical body is having. And this coincides with different emotions. So what are some emotions that you might feel? If you believe that nobody wants you, right? You might feel sadness. You might feel almost fear, like, what if this ends up being the rest of my life? What if nobody's going to want to marry me, or no one wants to be my friend, or whatever it might be? You might feel embarrassment. Like, oh gosh, what if other people find out I'm like this and they leave me and it's in front of people, and there might be shame. Lots of different emotions can come up, but those are just a few that I will um, go over. Now, ultimately, certain actions, we're going to take certain actions in response to these emotions. They are going to trigger us to do certain things or not do certain things, whether we recognize it or not. So, for example, if we believe that nobody wants us, and it might be that what we end up doing is we isolate. Nobody wants me, or nobody wants to be around me. Why would we be around people? We'd probably isolate, right? You're probably going to not let people know that you're looking or you're on the market. If this is a case where you're trying to get married, right? You might actually self-sabotage. When someone shows interest, you end up thinking, well, nobody wants me anyway, or nobody would like to be with me, or it's going to end up ending, so I might as well just cut it off, right? Nip it at the bud. You might self-sabotage to avoid the possibility of rejection. Now, what ends up happening here is this might be a neural impulse, right? But once we get to this end of the cascade, the actions then reinforce the thoughts, physical reactions, emotions, and then it keeps happening over and over again, right? If you do things like isolate, not let people know that you're looking, self-sabotage, all you're doing is performing the actions that make this thought or this statement feel truer, and it's becoming a deeper belief. And so it makes you feel worse. It makes the emotions more intense, and it strengthens the impulse. And we start calling this a neural circuit. It circuits it just over and over and over again, strengthens. And the thing that's really important to know is that neural impulses and these neural circuits, they don't get destroyed. They either strengthen or weaken. And so when we're strengthening this, all that's happening in our brain is that this is becoming the main cascade. This is becoming what your brain automatically defaults to anytime the trigger is there, and the trigger is the thought, right? It just embeds itself, and that becomes how you live your life. And now that becomes your truth. You start to think, well, nobody wants me, and so you do everything that you shouldn't do. How do we interrupt this? How can we interrupt something like this, which is so, so strong, and change our brain? And it might feel overwhelming, and be like, yeah, and how would I do that? It seems so intense, but it is very possible. So here's the thing. We have 4 states of this circuit. We have the thought, we have the physiological responses, we have the emotions, and we have the actions. We can interrupt this circuit at any point in that sequence. But there are certain parts that are easier to interrupt at than others. So which part is that? Would it be the feeling, or sorry, the thought? Would it be the thought that we have? Well, here's the thing. I mentioned earlier, any given time, we are having thousands of thoughts, and we are not even fully aware of them. And It's very hard to interrupt or stop a thought in the process. The example I'm sure you've heard, if I say to you, don't think about Mecca, automatically, I can promise you, the Kaaba, a picture of the Kaaba, or, if you've ever been to Umrah, it came to your mind. When we try to hyper focus on something, it's hard to get rid of the thoughts. So that is not probably the best place to start. What about the physiological responses? Can we focus here? Can we interrupt the circuit here? You can, but most people do not have the level of nervous system regulation or mind body connection to be able to do this. This is something that takes a long time to train. It took me a while to learn this. This is something I know this because I literally teach it to clients. It is not something we default to. Most of us have never learned it in our entire lives, not at school, not from our families. And so it takes a lot of time to get here. What about emotions? Can we interrupt here? Emotions are very strong. If you were able to interrupt here, we wouldn't be in the cascade, right? Because the intensity of emotions are so overwhelming for some people, it'd be really hard to get a hold of ourselves when we're in the emotion. What about action? This is where we want to focus. The thing about actions is small or big, they are the easiest thing to initiate. They're the easiest thing to pull back. And we can really decide based on our mental energy in that instance, the emotional energy that we have, how intense of an action we want to take. It's not as easy to have that level of control with the other parts of the cascade. So we want to focus here. And this is how we're going to change our brain. So what are you going to do? Is we need to identify disconfirming experiences. This is how we change our brain. What is a disconfirming experience? It is an event, an experience that proves this initial negative thought is not true. It provides evidence to the counter. And this looks like taking certain actions that disprove this. So, for example, instead of isolating like we normally would, we would opt to socialize, to go out. Someone invites you and you're not feeling up to it. You force yourself to get up, to get dressed, and to go out with your friends, right? Instead of not letting people know that you're single because you're afraid of rejection, or you don't let as many people know, you tell people. Instead of self-sabotaging and stopping things in their track, you give people a chance. You do things that build your self-confidence, right? Maybe you buy a new outfit, or you get your hair cut, or you get a new cologne or a new perfume, right? You do something maybe physically that helps, or maybe you start working with someone more intentionally, a therapist, a coach that can help you build that. You actually take the real world actions that disconfirm this. And what ends up happening is that, remember when I said earlier, neural circuits are not destroyed, they're either strengthened or weakened. What is happening is that we strengthen a new neural circuit and we weaken this old one. So we have these new actions. So I'm going to move this out of the way so we don't confuse anyone. And we don't default as easily to this thought. And these physiological reactions actually are not as strong, and the emotions don't get as strong. And then we can keep doing this over and over again. We take different action, new action, to weaken the old circuit and create a new circuit, which then strengthens itself and embeds itself in the brain. And when we do that enough time, this becomes so weak that it's not the predominant cascade. The other new circuit, where it's like we are positive about ourselves, happens. And new thoughts develop with that, and new beliefs develop as well. So this doesn't become doesn't become the predominant belief. So this is how you change your brain. It really is that systematic and that easy. Now, of course, we're human beings, and it would be silly for me to think that this is an easy process. But the reality of it is, very often we don't even allow ourselves to consider other actions that we can take, because we have just become we have surrendered ourselves to the cascade, thinking nothing can change it. But my hope is that by you learning this and understanding that you can literally change the brain, you can shift your neural circuits, you can weaken old ones, create new ones, change the structure and function of your brain, regulate your nervous system in this way, you are going to be more willing to take the actions to weaken the old circuit and establish a new one. And the beautiful thing about actions is, even though it's hard, you don't need to be joyful or excited to do it, right? You can get yourself up regardless. And it is really important to have that mindset that even if I'm sad, even if I'm anxious, even if I feel afraid, I can still do the thing. The emotions aren't going to, they're not, it's not a person standing in front of me blocking me saying, no, you need to go back to your room and stay in bed. The emotions are emotions, they're feelings, right? They don't have to dictate our actions, or we can actually shift our actions on our own. So I hope that was super helpful to you guys. If you liked this type of video where I'm literally walking you through the very same systems that I use to coach my clients, then please, please, please let me know, and I will inshallah try to make some more visual types of videos like this. Like this video, comment below, share it with people who you think it would be helpful with. And of course, to the ladies who are looking for support dealing and healing their trauma, then the links are in the description as mentioned before. I'm going to stop sharing. And I will see you guys inshallah in the next one. Assalamu alaikum.